I gave everything to my family, my time, my money, my silence. But the day they asked me to give up my own room was the day I finally saw the truth. I was only loved for what I provided. This is my story of walking away from a toxic family dynamic, breaking free from emotional manipulation, and rediscovering who I am beyond the role they assigned me. I didn't leave to hurt them. I left to finally choose myself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life emotional stories that hit home. You know what hurts more than being unloved? Being useful but disposable. That thought came to me in the middle of folding my mother's laundry. A Tuesday evening, nothing special. She was in the kitchen cooking Evelyn's favorite soup, chicken and wild rice. I could smell the thyme and garlic floating in the air like a memory I didn't ask for. I'd just gotten home from work, 10 hours at the firm, skipped lunch, again. My name was the one on the mortgage, the power bill, even the stupid cable subscription no one watched but no one dared to cancel. Yet somehow, I was the one moving around the house like a quiet tenant instead of a daughter. I used to wonder when it started, when I stopped being the child and started becoming the backup plan. Maybe it was when I turned 12 and figured out how to file tax returns for Mom because she couldn't make sense of them. Or maybe it was the day Dad left and Mom's eyes changed. Not sad, just calculated. Evelyn was always the one to cry. I was the one who figured things out. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate her. She's sweet, soft-spoken, the kind of woman people instinctively want to protect. Even I felt it sometimes. But there's a weight to being the capable one, the invisible scaffolding holding everyone else up while no one notices your cracks. That Tuesday was when the foundation began to shift. Mom called me into the kitchen, like she always did when she needed something. Not a, "Hi, how was work?" Not a smile, just, "Keva, we need to talk about the bedroom." I didn't like her tone, too calm, too planned. "What about it?" She stirred the soup without looking at me. "Evelyn and Alex will be moving in for a while, just until they get back on their feet. You understand, right?" I blinked. "They're moving in?" She nodded, then glanced at me briefly. "They've been through a lot. Evelyn needs the master bedroom. You can move into the office." A pause. 1 second. 2. And then something inside me, something I'd tucked away for years, sat up straight. "I can move into the office?" I repeated, like I was asking for clarification. But what I was really doing was buying time, trying to process the absurdity. Mom gave a small shrug. "It's temporary." No apology, no question, no space for my answer. I thought about all the nights I stayed up worrying about Mom's blood pressure, the rent I paid on time, every month, the groceries I restocked, the water heater I had repaired last fall, the way I gave Evelyn money when she said her credit card had been hacked twice. "You didn't ask me," I said, quieter than I meant to. "You're not asking." "You're her sister," she said, as if that was supposed to explain everything. "You're the strong one." I stood there, soup boiling behind her, and felt the back of my throat burn. Not from anger, not at first, from recognition. She was never going to see me. Not really. "You've made up your mind," I said. Not a question. A confirmation. Mom finally looked me in the eye. And what I saw there wasn't cruelty. It was entitlement. She didn't think she was doing anything wrong. That made it worse. "You'll do the right thing," she said. "You always do." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on that bed, the one I'd chosen myself, after my first raise, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow, mocking clock. In my own room, my own house. Except it wasn't mine. Not really. It was Evelyn's world, Mom's house, Alex's temporary shelter. I was just here. And in that moment, I realized I was never living for myself, only auditioning for their approval, but not anymore, not for one more day. I didn't say anything for 2 days. Not because I didn't know what to say, it's just I wanted to see if anyone noticed my silence, if anyone would come to me, not to ask for something, but just to ask how I felt. No one did. On the third night, I came home to find Evelyn's suitcase in the hallway. Her perfume hung in the air, sweet and excessive. Alex's shoes were lined up neatly by the door. I remember thinking he even brought his gym bag. They weren't just visiting. They were moving in like the house had been waiting for them all along. I stepped into my bedroom, my room, and Evelyn was already sitting on the edge of the bed, sorting through her clothes. Her wedding ring sparkled under the lamp I bought last winter. She looked up. "Hey, sis." I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked. Her face hadn't changed since college. Always a little lost, always protected. The kind of woman people rescued, even when she was the one who started the fire. "I didn't know you'd be home this early," she added, awkwardly folding a blouse. Clearly, a beat of silence. She glanced toward the door. "Mom said it would only be temporary, just until we figure things out." I nodded slowly. "That's what she said to me too." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I walked to the closet, opened it, and stared at the row of clothes I'd chosen, paid for, lived in. Then I turned to her. "She didn't ask me, Ev. She told me. And now you're in my room." Evelyn sighed. "You always make things so dramatic. It's just a room." "No," I said, "it's not. It's the principle. You move in, you take my space, and no one thinks twice. You're used to being the one people make room for." That hit her. I saw it in her eyes, the tiny shift between offense and recognition. But she didn't apologize. She just stood up and left the room, her hands full of sweaters and silence. Later that night, Mom called me downstairs. She had that tone firm, patient, like a manager addressing a slightly difficult employee. "Keva," she began, "I know this is a big adjustment, but you're not being very gracious." I laughed. Quiet, bitter. "Gracious? You've always been independent," she said. "Strong. Your sister needs help right now." "And I don't?" I said. "I work full-time, I pay the bills, I keep this house running. When do I get to need something, Mom?" She looked surprised, like I'd said something in a foreign language. "You've never asked for anything," she said. "That's because I knew you wouldn't offer it." And just like that, something cracked. Not in her, in me. It was like the last 10 years replayed and fast-forward me driving her to appointments, wiring Evelyn money, eating leftovers so she could cook for them, and all the while pretending it was fine, because being needed felt close enough to being loved. But in that moment, I saw the truth. They loved what I did, not who I was. "I'm not staying in the office," I said. "Then where do you expect to go?" she asked. I paused. "Out." I turned around and walked upstairs. I didn't pack that night. I didn't cry. I didn't even slam the door. I just lay in bed, fully dressed, listening to the silence between us spread through the walls like cold smoke. In the morning, I folded the bedsheets, not out of habit, out of closure. Then I called Nora. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey," she said, like she'd been expecting me. "I need a place to stay," I said, voice low. "You already have one," she replied. "Come home." And for the first time in a long time, that word didn't feel borrowed. It felt earned. I arrived at Nora's place just after 9 p.m. It was raining. Not hard. The kind of rain that just lingers in the air, misty, tired. The kind of rain that doesn't wash anything away, just makes everything heavier. She opened the door like she'd been standing behind it the whole time. No questions, no pity. Just a warm towel and a quiet, "Come in." That's the thing about Nora, she doesn't try to fix you. She just makes space for you to exist. Her apartment was small, cozy, and smelled faintly of cedar and strong coffee. There was a blanket draped over the couch and a stack of books by the window. It didn't look like much, but that night, it felt like everything I needed. "I put clean sheets on the pullout," she said, almost too casually, like we hadn't just silently acknowledged that I'd left my life behind. I sat down, took off my shoes slowly. I was still soaked, not just from the rain. "Thanks," I said, voice hoarse. "I didn't know where else to go." "You knew exactly where to go," she said. I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks. We didn't talk much that night. She handed me a cup of tea. I curled up under the blanket, and the two of us watched a rerun of some cooking show with the volume low. At one point, she glanced over and asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She nodded like she'd expected that. Later, when I was alone in the guest room, lying on a mattress that didn't carry the weight of memories, I stared at the ceiling, not thinking, just breathing. There's a silence that comes after impact. It's not peaceful. It's stunned. It's the kind of silence where your body is still catching up to what your heart already knows. That was the night I finally stopped being angry, not because I forgave them, but because I didn't want to carry their story anymore. I'd been cast as the dependable one for so long, I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. Who was I when no one needed saving? That question kept me awake. In the morning, I woke up before sunrise. The apartment was still. Outside the window, the sky was the color of regret soft gray, barely shifting. I made coffee, sat on the balcony in Nora's oversized hoodie, and watched the city stretch itself awake. And for the first time in years, I wasn't expected to do anything. Not cook, not clean, not explain, not rescue. I just had to be. And that was terrifying. Because without the role I'd played for so long, I didn't know who I was. But somewhere in that quiet confusion, a seed of something else took root. Not revenge, not bitterness, curiosity. What if I lived a life that belonged only to me? What if I stopped asking for permission? What if, just maybe, I let go of who I was taught to be and found out who I actually am? I didn't have the answers yet, but I had time now, and that was a start. The first few days felt strange in the most ordinary way. There was no shouting, no passive-aggressive sighs from the kitchen, no slamming of doors or guilt-laced silences. Just the hum of Nora's espresso machine, the occasional knock of her cat's paw against the hallway wall, and the freedom to exhale without apology. I didn't do much. I read old cookbooks without cooking a thing, sat by the window and watched strangers exist, wrote half-finished thoughts in the Notes app and deleted them before they meant too much. I slept late, ate toast at 2 p.m., took long showers just because the water was hot. For the first time in years, I wasn't in service to someone else's comfort. Nora worked remotely, headphones always around her neck, Spotify jazz filling the apartment like background warmth. She didn't hover, but somehow her presence anchored me, like a lighthouse, solid, lit, but never chasing the waves. One afternoon, she handed me a flyer. Community Arts Center, free photography classes, Thursday nights, she said, sipping from her mug. I looked at it. Photography? You used to love it, remember? That trip to Portland senior year? You brought your camera everywhere. I laughed softly. Yeah. Then I graduated, got a job, and traded the camera for a paycheck. She raised an eyebrow. Maybe you could trade it back, just for an hour a week. I stared at the paper. It felt silly, indulgent, like something people with actual freedom did. But I held onto the flyer anyway. That Thursday, I went. I didn't tell anyone, not even Nora. I just showed up. The center was in an old firehouse, red brick and ivy covered, with creaky floors and windows that let in too much light. The kind of place that didn't pretend to be perfect, which made it feel safe. There were 6 of us strangers with different stories, but the same hunger to create something. The instructor, an older woman named June with silver hair and paint on her jeans, handed out old film cameras and said, "Shoot what makes you feel something. Don't think too much." So I didn't. I wandered. I took pictures of cracked sidewalks, coffee stains on napkins, window reflections at dusk. Nothing profound, just pieces of quiet. I realized then I had spent years curating a life that made other people comfortable, professional, practical, predictable. But there, behind the lens, I got to look at the world the way I wanted. I could frame it differently, pause it, question it. And maybe one day I'd reframe myself too. Back at the apartment that night, Nora looked up from her laptop and smiled. "You went, didn't you?" I nodded. "Yeah." "How'd it feel?" I thought for a moment. Like remembering something I forgot was mine. She didn't say anything else, just nodded, like she'd known all along I'd get there. That night, I slept with the window cracked open and the camera beside me on the nightstand. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next request, the next demand, the next guilt trip. I was just living, and it felt suspiciously like peace. One afternoon, while Nora was out running errands and I had the apartment to myself, I decided to help her clear the storage closet near the hallway. It was a small thing, boxes of old art supplies, winter coats, a half-broken coffee grinder. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't thinking about anything. I just wanted to be useful in a space where that didn't feel like a requirement. One of the boxes near the bottom was mine. I'd left it at Nora's place years ago after college. Just for a few weeks, I'd said. Then life happened. I never came back for it. Curious, I opened it. Inside were random fragments of a girl I barely remembered, a sketchbook with smudged graphite drawings, a mixtape CD labeled in Sharpie, Rainy Days plus Rage, a Polaroid of me holding an old film camera standing on a foggy bridge in Portland. I looked like someone who hadn't learned to shrink herself yet. And then, tucked between a book of poetry and a dusty scarf, I found something I didn't remember packing, an envelope. Old, yellowed, slightly curled at the edges. My name wasn't on it, but I recognized the handwriting on the back. Sophia L. My mother's handwriting. It wasn't sealed, just folded shut. Part of me hesitated. Reading it felt like trespassing, even after everything. But another part, older, quieter, tired of not knowing, opened it. It was a letter. Not to me, not even to Evelyn. It was to someone named Amelia. The tone was raw, vulnerable, nothing like the clipped, practical woman I grew up with. I still think about that summer. The lake house, the sketchbook you gave me. I wanted to send you a drawing, but I've barely picked up a pencil since the wedding. I think I lost something in that dress, something I never got back. I sat down on the floor. There were no dates, no explanations, just 4 handwritten pages of longing, regret, and memory. Mom had once wanted to be an artist. That part I knew barely. She used to doodle in the corners of her grocery lists, draw quietly while we watched TV. But I never saw her treat it as anything more than a passing habit. I never knew it had mattered. And I certainly didn't know about Amelia. The name came up again and again, sometimes with joy, sometimes with something dangerously close to grief. I think Evelyn has your eyes. Not in color, but in the way they soften when she looks at people. Keva doesn't. Keva looks like me, too sharp. Too much. I hope she turns out softer than I did. That part cut deeper than I expected. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was cracked open. It's a strange thing to see your mother as a woman. Not a role, not a duty, just a human being who made choices. Some good, some cruel, some that were never really hers. I folded the letter and put it back in the box, heart pounding. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained something. Maybe Mom didn't know how to love me because I reminded her of the part of herself she had to bury. And maybe loving Evelyn wasn't favoritism. Maybe it was nostalgia, a desperate attempt to rewrite the softness she once lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the letter now laid open on the table, and whispered, "Who were you before you became my mother?" There was no answer, of course, but the question echoed. And for the first time, I wanted to know. Not for her redemption, not for forgiveness, but because I needed to understand the roots of my own becoming. I didn't tell Nora about the letter right away, not because I was hiding it. I just needed it to sit, like tea steeping in silence. I wasn't ready to speak the words out loud, not until I understood what they meant, not just about my mother, but about me. The next Thursday, I brought my camera to class again. June had us shoot in natural light this time. She said, "No filters, no flash. Let the shadows fall where they want." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Let the shadows fall where they want. I wandered alone through side streets and alleys, capturing things I used to overlook. Rust stains on brick, old paint peeling like tired skin, a girl on a balcony braiding her own hair. Everything looked different now. Or maybe I did. I realized that for most of my life, I'd been trying to erase shadows to make things smooth, digestible, functional. I kept things in order so no one would see the chaos beneath. I thought that was love. I thought that was safety. But maybe some things are only beautiful because they're a little broken. Maybe people too. That weekend, I visited the old park near the house I grew up in. It was half intentional. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just walked, slowly, like the sidewalk might remember me. The swings were still there, rustier, smaller. The oak tree we used to climb was gone, cut down maybe, or struck by time. I sat on a bench, not far from where Dad once tied my shoelaces when I was 7. He always tied them too tight. I used to cry about it. Now I'd give anything to feel that pressure again. I closed my eyes and asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. What would it look like to live without proving anything to anyone? No permission, no performance, no look what I've done, does that make me worthy now? The answer didn't come in words. It came later that night, when I started a new photo series. I called it Unsaid. Photos of doorways slightly ajar, pairs of shoes without feet, cups of coffee going cold on windowsills. Each one felt like a version of a sentence that had once tried to form in my mouth but died before sound. It was, for the first time, not about being good. It was just about being honest. When Nora saw the series laid out across the living room floor, she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she picked up an image of my childhood bedroom door, shot from outside, just slightly cracked. "Damn," she said. "That's the one?" I didn't answer, just looked at it. I knew why it hit her, because that wasn't just a photo. That was me, always standing at the threshold, never quite let in, never fully gone either. I wasn't trying to break the door anymore. I was finally stepping away from it. It was a Tuesday, again. Funny how pain and clarity seem to favor ordinary days. I had just gotten back from the community center. June had complimented one of my shots, a close-up of a cracked glass on a windowsill. "There's restraint in it," she'd said. "That's not easy to capture." I didn't tell her I hadn't meant to capture anything. I just saw something broken and paused long enough to let it be seen. I was halfway through reheating leftover soup when my phone buzzed. "Mom." I stared at the name for a moment. My stomach didn't clench. My hands didn't tremble. That surprised me. I picked up. "Hello?" She hesitated. That was new. "It's me," she said, as if I wouldn't recognize her voice. I waited. "I wouldn't call if it wasn't important," she added. "Of course." "What do you need, Mom?" A pause. Longer this time. It's Evelyn," she said. "She's been out of work. Alex, too. The bills are piling up. The heater broke again. I don't know how much longer I can keep the lights on." I listened. I didn't interrupt. I let every word fall, heavy and unshaped. She went on about the rising grocery costs, her prescription refills, the car insurance. Each sentence felt like a rattle in a long dormant box, and I could hear it in her voice, the expectation. The soft buildup to a very familiar ask. I could almost finish her sentence for her. "We just need a little help." But I didn't wait for it. "Mom," I said gently. "I know." Another pause. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "And I know what this call is. And I'm not going to pretend I don't understand why it's hard for you to ask." Her voice softened. "I'm not proud of it, Keva. But I'm your mother." That landed, harder than I expected. "I know," I said again. But this time it meant something different. There was a long silence, and then I said, carefully, "I'm not the same person I was when I lived there. I don't live in that house anymore, Mom. And I don't live in that role anymore either." "I'm not asking for much," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But even a little is too much when it costs me. Another beat. "I'm not punishing you," I continued. "I'm protecting myself. I needed to leave so I could stop surviving and start living. I want that for you too, but I can't carry everyone anymore." Silence again. Then, "You sound different," she said, almost in disbelief. "I am different," I said. "That's the point." I didn't hang up. Neither did she. We just sat there, breathing on opposite ends of a line that used to bind us by obligation. Now it hung loose. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. And that, more than anything, told me she heard me, even if she didn't agree. When the call ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad, but not in the way I used to. It wasn't the sadness of being unseen. It was the quiet grief of letting go of something you never really had to begin with. And that kind of grief, I could live with. The morning after the call, I didn't wake up with heaviness. I expected to. I thought I'd feel guilt clawing at the edges of my calm. But instead, there was just stillness, like the aftermath of a long storm. I made coffee slowly, letting the sound of the drip fill the apartment like a gentle metronome. Nora was out early, some client meeting, and the place felt sacred in its quiet. On the table were the photo prints I'd been working on all week. The Unsaid series had grown from a few shots into something deeper, almost like a visual diary. Fragments of moments, all soft and unfinished. Like me. That afternoon, I dropped them off at the local gallery. June had suggested I submit them. I almost laughed when she said it, but her face didn't budge. "Your work says what your mouth doesn't," she told me. "People need to feel that." I didn't expect a yes from the gallery, but I gave it anyway. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I was just showing up. Later, I stopped by a secondhand bookstore near the community center. I wasn't looking for anything, but a worn paperback caught my eye, no title on the spine, just a handwritten note inside. "To anyone who ever felt too much, keep going." I bought it without flipping another page. That night, I cooked dinner for Nora. Real food. Nothing fancy. Just pasta and roasted vegetables. We ate on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, the city humming softly below us. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." I smiled. I think I stopped negotiating for space in other people's lives. She nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to say that. And I realized this was it. Not a grand victory, not a moment of fireworks and applause, just a quiet becoming. No longer Keva the provider, Keva the dutiful daughter, Keva the necessary sacrifice, just Keva. The next day, the gallery emailed. They wanted to feature my series in their monthly exhibition. No promises, just interest. But interest was enough. I said yes. And when I closed my laptop, I didn't run to call anyone. I didn't picture my mother's reaction or wonder if Evelyn would be proud. I just sat there, hands in my lap, heart intact. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was living without auditioning. No roles, no scripts, just breath, just being. It was a Sunday morning, one of those soft ones, where the city feels like it's speaking in whispers. I walked alone to the park near Nora's place, not because I had a plan, or a playlist, or something to sort through. I just felt like being under trees. The leaves had started to fall early that year. They floated around me like pieces of someone else's memory. The path was quiet. Even the wind felt gentle, like it knew I didn't need to be tested anymore. I sat on a bench near the pond. Ducks glided across the surface like they had nowhere urgent to be. Across from me, a little girl helped her mother adjust her scarf. The mother smiled, tucked a curl behind the girl's ear. They laughed about something small, something secret. I watched them, and for a moment, I felt that familiar tug, the ache of not having that, of not being that. But the feeling didn't stay. It didn't spiral into longing or bitterness or comparisons like it used to. It just came, brushed against me, and passed, like wind, because I wasn't empty anymore. That used to be my fear, that if I stopped giving to everyone else, I'd end up alone, unloved, irrelevant. But sitting there in the quiet, I realized something simple and unshakable. I wasn't alone. I was just mine. No longer divided between who I needed to be for others and who I was when no one was watching. That afternoon, I visited the gallery. My photos had been up for 2 days already. I hadn't gone to the opening. I didn't want to perform excitement for people I didn't know. But today, I went. There were strangers walking slowly through the space. A few stood in front of my wall 10 photos from Unsaid, hung in order, like sentences from a language only I spoke. A woman, maybe in her 60s, stood in front of the final photo, the cracked door. She didn't say anything, just stared, then wiped a tear quietly and walked away. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know the story behind the door. And she didn't need to. That moment wasn't about recognition. It was about connection. Something passed between us, wordless, human, honest. And in that second, I understood. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a cracked door, a stranger's tear, and a life no longer lived on the sidelines. I didn't need to go back, because forward had finally become enough. A week after the gallery showing, I got a letter, not an email, a real letter. In my mailbox, handwritten, no return address. I knew the handwriting instantly. My mother's. I stood in the hallway holding the envelope like it might break. I didn't open it right away. I made tea, fed Nora's cat, took a long, hot shower, dried my hair. Only then, in the soft quiet of my room, did I sit on the edge of the bed and read it. It was short. No apology, no plea, just this. Keva, I saw the photos. I recognized the last one. I didn't know it looked like that from the outside. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. The first time, I waited for the ache. The second time, I waited for the anger. The third time, I just breathed. She didn't ask to come back in. She didn't explain why the door was always closed, but for the first time, she saw it, saw me, and that was enough. Not to erase anything, not to fix everything, just enough. I didn't write back, not because I was still hurt, but because there was nothing more to say. The door had been closed for so long, and now I had chosen to walk away from it, not in spite, but in peace. That weekend, I took the train out of the city. No destination in mind. Just me, a small backpack, and my camera. I took photos of strangers sleeping against the window, of a boy offering his last cookie to his sister, of clouds that looked like they were trying to remember their shapes. I felt no need to explain where I was going, because finally, I wasn't leaving anything behind. I was simply going forward. Later, as the sun dipped under the horizon, I stood on a wooden platform somewhere between cities. The wind picked up. I closed my eyes, let it touch my face, and for the first time, I didn't brace. I let it move through me. No fight, no fear, just breath, just now, just me, alive and free.